Listening 4. Admissions Office.
Listen to part of a conversation between a student and an admissions assistant.
Excuse me, but the secretary referred me to your office.
Yes?
I'm a new student. Well, actually, I'm not enrolled yet, but I'm trying to get all my admissions applications turned in today.
What's your name?
Robert Franklin?
Middle initial?
T.
Oh, I see. Wait a minute, and we'll find out what you have to do. Well, according to the records here, you have your admissions form, a financial aid application, 3 letters of recommendation, transcripts from regional college. So that's everything you need except a transcript from county community college.
That's what I thought. You see, I took a couple of courses there during the summer because it's close to my parents' house. Anyway, almost all of my first 2 years is from regional college, and that's where I'm transferring from. In fact, the credit for the community college courses appears on the transcript from regional college as transfer credit, but it doesn't show my final grades in the courses.
Oh, and you haven't been able to register for your courses here at State University because the computer shows that you're missing some of your application materials. Is that it?
Exactly. What I was wondering is whether you have, like, a policy for this kind of situation, so I could go ahead and register for this first semester while we wait for the transcript to get here. It should be here now. I requested it the same time that I requested a transcript from regional college, but they're just slow at county community.
That happens sometimes. Do you have a copy of your transcript from county community college?
Yes, I do. It's right here. Of course, it isn't an official copy. It's stamped unofficial copy.
But I can use this one until the official copy gets here. Here's the best way to handle this. We can give you a provisional admission. That means that you're admitted contingent upon the receipt of your official transcript. That'll allow you to register for your courses this semester. When County Community College sends us your official transcript, then I can change your status from provisional admission to regular admission.
Oh, that's great.
Is this the only copy you have of your transcript?
No, I have another one.
Good. Then I'll just keep this in your file.
Okay.
Now the only problem is you can't register for next semester without regular admission status. And you need the official transcript for me to do that. So you still need to keep after them to get everything sent to us as soon as possible.
Right. Well, I'll do that. But at least I have some time to get it done. What do I need to do now? To get registered, I mean.
Just wait here while I enter everything into the computer. And then you can take a copy of your provisional admission along with you to the office for transfer students. They'll assign you an advisor and help you get registered later today.
18. Why does the student go to the admissions office? (19) What is missing from the student's file? (20) Listen again to part of the conversation, and then answer the following question.
Oh, and you haven't been able to register for your courses here at State University because the computer shows that you're missing some of your application materials. Is that it?
Why does the woman say this?
Is that it?
(21) What does the woman suggest that the man do? (22) What will the student most probably do now?
Listening 5. Geology class.
Listen to part of a lecture in a geology class.
The original source of energy is what? The sun. Then plants use the sun's energy during photosynthesis to convert water and carbon dioxide into sugar and oxygen. And they store the energy in the chemicals that the plant produces. When animals eat plants, the energy is transferred to their bodies. So then the plants and animals die and decay, and they sink to the bottom of the sea or disintegrate into the soil, and then they're covered by more and more sediment as rivers deposit mud and sand into the sea, or the seas advance and retreat. Of course, it's a very gradual process, one that takes place over, millions of years. But finally, the organic material begins to transform into the hydrocarbons, and the hydrocarbons eventually become oil and gas deposits. So, how does this happen? Well, at first, the oil and gas are mixed with sand and sediment, but as the layers on top increase, then so does the pressure. And under pressure, mixtures of oil and sand and water, they seep down through the layers of porous rock. That's usually sandstone or limestone. So they sink down until they reach a layer of non-porous rock, and that's where they pool because they can't pass through the non-porous rock. Okay. Sometimes there are breaks in the layers of rocks, and the breaks allow oil and gas to bubble up, and eventually they reach the surface of the earth again. So when this happens, the gas and some oil evaporate into the air, but they leave a sticky black tar that appears in pools or pits on the surface. But most crude oil is found in underground formations, which we call traps. So today I want to talk about the major types of oil traps. In all the different types of traps, the oil collects in porous rocks along with gas and water. And over time, the oil moves up toward the surface of the earth through cracks and holes in the porous rock until it reaches a non-porous rock deposit. And the non-porous rock, remember, it won't allow the oil to continue moving. So the oil becomes trapped under the non-porous rock deposit. Now, think for a moment. While oil was forming and moving, the earth was also undergoing changes. In fact, there were enormous movements of the crust as the center began to cool. When folding happened, it was like the earth fell back onto itself, and when faulting happened, it was, one layer was forced by rocks above down through the layers below. So you can see that the repositioning of porous and non-porous rock, this repositioning would have affected the movement of oil. When the earth shifted, cracks would have been opened and non-porous layers would have been dropped over channels that had previously been used as pathways for the transfer of oil and gas to the surface. Okay, as geologists, we're interested in locating the traps. Now, why would that be so? Because that's where we'll find the oil and gas reserves, and that's what I really want to talk about today. So there are several different types of traps, but today we're going to talk about the three most common ones: the anticline trap, the salt dome trap, and the fault trap. Look at this diagram. Here's an example of an anticline. As you can see, the oil's trapped under a formation of rock that resembles an arch. That's because the arch was bent from a previously flat formation by uplifting. In this anticline, the petroleum's trapped under a formation of non-porous rock with a gas deposit directly over it. This is fairly typical of an anticline. Because gas isn't as dense as oil, it rises above it. The dome over the top can be rock, as in this example, or it could be a layer of clay. The important thing is that the cap of non-porous material won't let the oil or gas pass upwards or sideways around it. Now let's look at a diagram of a salt dome. This salt dome shows how a cylinder-shaped salt deposit has pushed up through a layer of sedimentary rocks, causing them to arch and fracture. The oil deposits have collected along the sides of the salt dome. Salt's a unique substance. With enough heat and pressure on it, the salt will slowly flow, kind of like a glacier. But unlike glaciers, salt that's buried below the surface of the earth can move upward until it reaches the earth's surface, where it's then dissolved by groundwater or rain. Well, To get all the way to the Earth's surface, salt has to lift and break through many layers of rock, and that's what ultimately creates the salt dome. Finally, I want to show you a fault trap. Fault traps are formed by the movement of rock along a fault line. This diagram represents a fracture in the Earth that's shifted a non-porous rock formation on top of a porous formation. In this case, the reservoir rock, which is porous, has moved opposite a layer of non-porous rock. The non-porous rock prevents the oil from escaping. Remember, as in all traps, the oil's collected in the porous rock and trapped underground by the non-porous rock. Geologists study the terrain for indications of possible oil traps. For example, a bulge in a flat surface may signal the presence of a salt dome. Your textbook has a good explanation of how technology assists us in this effort, so I want you to read Chapter 3 before class next time.
23. What is the lecture mainly about? (24) Why does the professor begin by talking about the process that transforms organic material into oil and gas? (25) Listen again to part of the lecture and then answer the following question.
Okay, as geologists, we're interested in locating the traps. Now, why would that be so? Because that's where we'll find the oil and gas reserves.
Why does the professor say this?
Now, why would that be so?
(26) Select the diagram of the anticline trap that was described in the lecture. Click on the correct diagram. (27) Identify the non-porous rock in the diagram. Click on the correct letter. (28) According to the professor, what do geologists look for when they are trying to locate a salt dome?
Listening 6. Anthropology class.
Listen to part of a discussion in an anthropology class.
Before we start, does anyone have a question about the reading assignment? Yes, Jim.
Just wondering whether I have a good handle on the concept of power. The book said it was the ability to exercise influence and control over others.
Right. And this can be observed on every level of society, from, well, the relationships within a family to the relationships among nations.
Okay. But then the book, it goes on to say that power is usually structured by customs and social institutions or laws. But then I read that power can be exerted by persuasive arguments or coercion or even brute force.
Sounds like you got it. But is there a question?
Well, it sounds like, in general, groups with the greatest resources. It sounds like they always have an advantage in power struggles. So I was thinking that power is not really justified because it could involve resistance. I mean, some people may oppose the individuals or groups in power, but they could still...
Impose their will?
Yes.
So you want to know whether power always involves force?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Because there was a sentence or two in there about legitimate power.
Okay. Well, actually, that is a perfect lead-in to today's lecture. You're right, Jim, that sometimes power is not viewed by society as justified, even though those in control are imposing their will. So, sometimes power is not legitimate. But what about power that is accepted by members of society as right and just? That is legitimate power. Now we're talking about authority. And that's what I want to focus on today. And then we'll come back to your question again at the end of the class. Okay. When individuals or institutions possess authority, they have a recognized and established right to determine policies, with the acceptance of those over whom they exercise control. Max Weber, the German classical sociologist, proposed 3 types of authority in society: traditional, charismatic, and rational or legal authority. In all 3 types, he acknowledged the right of those in positions of power to lead, with the consent of the governed.
So, if I get this right, power is the big category, but authority is a kind of power when it's recognized as the right of the person or the institution.
Yes, when those under the authority of a leader or group give their permission. Got it?
I think so.
But in all 3 types of authority in society, Weber acknowledged the right of those in positions of power to lead, with the consent of the governed. So, how did Weber differentiate among the 3 types of authority? Well, he divided them according to how the right to lead and the duty to follow are interpreted, how the power is legitimized. In traditional authority, for example, power resides in customs and conventions that provide certain people or groups with legitimate power in their societies. Often their origin is found in sacred traditions. The example that most often comes to mind is monarchy, in which kings or queens rule by birthright, not because of any particular quality of leadership or political election, just because they have a claim to authority based on traditional acceptance of their position, and in some cases, their unique relationships with and responsibility in religious practices.
You mean like the royal families in Europe or the emperors in Asia?
Precisely.
Because the Queen of England, for example, she's the head of the Church of England as well as the monarch. I think that's right.
And that claim to authority is traditional.
But she really doesn't have much power, though, anymore, does she?
I see your point, but what is important is not how much power she has, but that the power is given to her by the people because of the traditional authority that she claims as the heir to the throne. Now, this contrasts sharply with charismatic authority, which is derived because of personal attributes that inspire admiration, loyalty, and even devotion. Leaders who exercise this type of authority may be the founders of religious movements or political parties, but it's not their traditional right to lead. What's important here is that their followers are mobilized more by the force of the leader's personality than by tradition or the law. So, when we think of charismatic leaders in the United States, who comes to mind?
Well, I can't think of anyone who is alive today, but maybe John Kennedy would be an example because he was able to get people behind him.
Good example. Kennedy was able to project a youthful and energetic image that people were proud to identify with.
Or Ronald Reagan. I prefer Republicans, Dr. Cooper. Reagan had a lot of charismatic appeal, and he exercised authority when he was in office.
Great. Now we have both parties represented. In any case, going back to Weber, to qualify for charismatic authority, a leader must be able to enlist others in the service of a cause that transforms the social structure in some way. So politics, especially at the highest levels, it often attracts charismatic leaders because it offers the opportunity for social change. Which leaves us with the 3rd type of authority, legal rational authority, or power that is legitimized by rules, laws, and procedures. In such a system, leaders gain authority not by traditional birthrights or by charismatic appeal, but rather because they're elected or appointed in accordance with the law, and power is delegated to layers of officials who owe their allegiance to the principles that are agreed upon rationally, and because they accept the ideal that the law is supreme. In a legal, rational society, people accept the legitimacy of authority as a government of laws, not leaders.
So that would be a judge then, as an example of someone with legal, rational authority.
Well, it might be a judge, but it could be a bureaucrat in an office, or even the president, let's say, like Richard Nixon, who was threatened with impeachment because he was perceived as not governing within the law. Do you see what I mean?
I think so.
Jim, is the difference between power and authority sorting itself out now?
It is.
Okay, then. Some sociologists have postulated that the three types of authority, the traditional, charismatic, and legal rational, that these types represent stages of evolution in society. That pre-industrial societies tend to respect traditional authority, but as societies move into an industrial age, the importance of tradition wanes in favor of charismatic authority, with a natural rise of charismatic leaders. Then, as the modern era evolves, the legal rational authority embodied by rules and regulations, it replaces the loyalty to leaders in favor of a respect for the law. Of course, other sociologists argue that in practice, authority may be represented by a combination of several of these ideal types at any one time.
29. What is the main purpose of this discussion?
"30. Why do the students mention Kennedy and Reagan?"
31. According to the professor, what two factors are associated with charismatic authority? 32. Listen again to part of the discussion and then answer the following question.
But what about power that is accepted by members of society as right and just? That is legitimate power. Now we're talking about authority, and that's what I want to focus on today.
Why does the professor say this?
But what about power that is accepted by members of society as right and just? That is legitimate power.
"33. In an evolutionary model, how is rational legal authority viewed? 34. What does the professor imply about the three types of authority?